Welcome to DevOps Chats, the industry-leading podcast for DevOps, digital transformation, cloud native, and cybersecurity. If it's happening on DevOps Chats.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan Shimel.
And this is Mitch Ashley.
And you're listening and watching now DevOps Chats.
Yeah.
Mitchell, it feels like, wow, it's been a while. It's been a minute, as they say, the cool kids say.
I feel like we're Jake and Elwood in the Bluesmobile. You know?
Absolutely. Maybe we should be wearing dark sunglasses. I don't know. But seriously, I mean, for those of you who may be tuning in for the first time, Mitchell, Ashley, and I, my friend Mitchell and I have been doing podcasting, no shit, since maybe 2004.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And so it's 20 years. 20 years of doing podcasting. Of course, we didn't have video podcasts then, did we, Mitchell?
No, we didn't. And we just did it wherever we were on the road, you know, hop on Skype and record with Pamela. Or I think.
Yes, do you remember that? Unless you were losing the podcast equipment, which we won't get into.
That happens in San Francisco, I hear.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah. But anyway, look, and you know, for a long time it was originally Still Secure after all these years, podcast, and then it was Security Boulevard and DevOps Chats, which this is. So this is probably the fourth or fifth iteration of podcast series that Mitch and I have done together over the years. And, you know, you'll get a flavor for what we're going to do. We try to have a good time. We try to keep it casual, but we try to keep it real and interesting. And that's what we're going to be doing here today on this iteration of DevOps Chat. And Mitch, we're going to try to do this, every week?
Yeah, we are. We are. And by the way, you know, this DevOps Chat is proof that you can't keep a good podcast down. You know,
that's one way of looking at it. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and it is available as a video podcast, but we know only about 40% of podcasts are listened or watched as videos. So if you're listening to this as an audio file, that's cool too. We're going to try not to do anything that, you know, you're going to have less of an experience because you're listening to audio versus video. It's not like Mitchell and I are two male models here, you know, and you're missing some eye candy.
The faces made for audio podcast.
Exactly.
To adapt the phrase.
So we'll go from there. But that being said, you know, here on DevOps Chats, in addition, you know, to Mitchell and I bantering, we're going to try to cover what we think of the big stories around DevOps. Of course, we'll be pulling from DevOps.com, you know, our TechStrong flagship site, as well as TechStrong TV, which we do 3 days a week, about three and a half hours a day of programming. So we'll be referencing content from there, and we'll keep in the show notes any URLs or links to these. We may even be able to throw up some QR codes if you are watching it on video for you to check that content out. So diving right into it, Mitch, where do you want to start off? It's January still, 2024, new year. Where would you like to start in this new year?
It is, you know, when you called me and said, hey, I've got this domain called devops.com. What do you know about DevOps? And I said, well, not much yet, but let me go figure it out. You know, one of the first things that I implemented where I was at the time was Hudson, and which turns into Jenkins, of course. And of course, Jenkins still has, you know, 40-50% market share, is still alive and well. And some interesting articles on devops.com about that.
Absolutely. I think Jenkins, I think some people are still, Mitchell, a little surprised when they hear that Jenkins still commands. The latest number I saw was from the CD Foundation, did a survey, I think last November or October, and it said, according to their survey, and believe it or not, 43% of CI/CD is still done via Jenkins, which is astonishing. But Mitch, before we jump into the two articles, and I do look forward to jumping into them because they're good, I think that whole kind of revelation that Jenkins is still as big as it is goes to something deeper and bigger. and that is how big DevOps is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in 2023, and maybe even a little in 2022, you know, there were rumblings and grumblings in the market. Platform engineering is the new DevOps. DevOps is dead. That's marketing stuff. But a lot of people were saying, you know, we're not getting the DevOps we hoped for. We're not getting the ROI. We're not getting the magic that we wanted. And maybe it's not, you know, all this kumbaya and maybe the tools and everything else. But, you know, almost like, you know, maybe a little bit of the shine was coming off of DevOps. And I think, Mitch, being DevOps.com, we have a responsibility, right? This is our cross to bear, so to speak. This is our thing to champion. DevOps is alive and well by almost any metric you want to look at. Use of Jenkins being one of them. But go look, you know, Google searches around DevOps topics. They haven't fallen off at all. They've grown.
Our viewers, our readers is increasing, you know, page.
DevOps.com had one of the best years they've had in years. We've had, you know, in terms of readership and views and everything. You know, it used to be our Security Boulevard site was 150% bigger than DevOps.com, and it's not anymore, right? DevOps has been catching up. So I don't buy into the DevOps is dead thing at all. I do think what we're seeing, though, is like every other technology and framework, and you know, you and I have been around the block. You have that hype cycle. It was overly hyped. It went into the trial of disillusionment. Now it comes out the other side into whatever was called the plateau of
something. I remember.
Yeah,
absolutely. I said the same thing. Yeah,
and I think that's what we are experiencing. And we're going to talk more about this on here and at DevOps.com. But, you know, I've had a chance to talk to some DevOps leaders. Spoke to Jody Bonzai, who's the CEO at Harness and was the founder CEO of AppDynamics, also founder CEO of Traceable AI. Spoken to Kosa K, the founder of Jenkins.
Yeah.
Yep. Spoke up to Sasha Labouré, the co-founder and chief strategy officer at CloudBees. Spoken to David DeSanto from GitLab and Ashley Kramer from GitLab. Shlomi, my friend Shlomi Ben Hayim from JFrog, and Stephen Chin from JFrog. And they all, I mean, these are public and big companies, and they all say the same thing. DevOps ain't going anywhere.
No. As
a matter of fact, they think we've entered a new era of DevOps. Right, where call what happened before Gen 1, and I hate to use the term DevOps 2.0, that's an overused kind of paradigm. But, you know, in the first phase of DevOps, we, as Jody says, Jody Bonzai, we cobbled together tools to make sort of a coherent DevOps platform, you know, an end-to-end DevOps story. But now we're in a new era where we have purpose-built. That's a word from Still Secure, right? Purpose-built appliances. We have purpose-built DevOps tools that were designed from the ground up to do that whole job from A to Z, not just CI/CD or testing or an IDE or Git or something like that, a repository. And I think the other thing is where people used to kind of poo-poo the cultural aspect of DevOps. I think it's taken for granted now that, yes, cross-functional teams aren't a bad idea. They're not a bad thing. And we see, and that's really when you get down to the cultural aspects of DevOps, those cross-functional teams working together in harmony. Not to sound too kumbaya. That's what DevOps is about.
Tear was forming in my eye, but okay.
Yeah, I got you right there, huh, Mitch?
Yeah, you had me at Harmony.
Yeah, but you know, like Three Dog Night. But anyway, I mean, what do you think, Mitchell?
I'm just kind of reaching back when I first started talking to people about DevOps, once I kind of felt like I had a handle on it. I would always say, yes, there's DevOps tools and there's technologies and a lot of things that kind of are kind of go in place to have a tool chain and a pipeline workflow, all that kind of stuff. But if you step back for a minute, it's kind of like Agile. You could say Agile is sprints. Well, yeah, that's just the mechanism. What it is about is deciding how you're going to build what you're going to build, doing time resource constrained development and pushing out releases more quickly. Well, DevOps has its flavor of that, right? It's cross-functional teams, just like Agile was. It's about how do we create software in smaller increments, smaller bites, whether you deploy them, fast or not, but being able to automate how often they get checked in and built, the CI/CD process, which is kind of the heart of DevOps, right? It's where most, if not all, people start implementing DevOps. But suffice it to say, DevOps is about how you create software, not the tools you use to create software. Yes, it's the tools too, but it's changing how you think about creating software. And some of it is culture. Yeah, it's not the silos and the stovepipes and the monolithic organizations as well as monolithic applications, but it's also software architectures and automating things so that you create flow through the process. So what I was thinking about when you were talking, Alan, is it does remind me of Agile. Agile hasn't gone away. We still use Agile. We use a lot of Agile principles in DevOps, where you technically, do scrums and all that kind of thing. And DevOps has hit that sort of mainstream place where, pretty much everybody is doing it, at least in some form. And I think its real strength is how it's adaptable, right? Not every organization is going to behave like a greenfield. Let's start out, we'll set this up like we want to do it the right way. A lot of folks are living in mainframes or living with legacy applications or live in this bifurcated world of some of everything. And you have to adapt to what your environment is and also what your organization can do. How much change and how do they work and can
and
they
how
work?
fast.
So I think
agree.
it's adaptability is its real strength.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to there was never a manifesto. It was hard to pin down a definition of what it is exactly. And I think, the upside of that is it gives it this adaptability that it could be anything you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you don't get...
And that's interesting.
DevOps religious wars, like we used to back in the
We
methodology
don't see much of
days.
that.
God knows, yes. So that's the good news on DevOps today from Pastor Mitchell and Rabbi Allen over here. But the high priest of DevOps. But
there we go.
the other thing is, you and I both, Mitch, have had a chance to stay in touch with a lot of the people who helped kind of found the DevOps movement, like our friend John Willis and Damon Edwards and Patrick Dubois, the guy, that godfather of DevOps himself. Was here in our offices just in August for this AI hackathon we did. And we spoke about some of this stuff. And yes, DevOps isn't new anymore. It's 10, 12 years old. Mm-hmm. But it's still relevant. And to sit and start trying to fight about, is it real? And some of the religious stuff that we fought about early on, that's not relevant either, right? It's full speed ahead. Let's build software and deploy it as fast as we can and at the best quality that we can. Anyway, as you were saying, Mitchell, there are two interesting articles on Jenkins that appeared in DevOps.com recently. One was actually in December. And it was, I actually have it here and I'll bring it up. It's The Future of Jenkins in 2024. And it was by Gilead David Mayan. And it's a great article. I highly, highly recommend it. And it laid out a really, I think, valid point of view of what you're doing with DevOps. With what you're doing with Jenkins. Yeah. And look, for me, the real kind of crux of the issue with Jenkins is, where does it fit in a cloud native world, where cloud native has become the kind of de facto compute standard? Does Jenkins have a place there? Much like years ago we asked, does Puppet have a place there? Does Chef have a place there? Ansible. And I think the market's answered those questions. But yet Jenkins holds on, as we said, 43% market share. So maybe it does have a place there. I remember I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think a couple of things is it has longevity and momentum, right? You're not just going to rip and replace Jenkins tomorrow because you're on a whim, right? There's something looks a little shinier than what you've got. It really runs the roads. I mean, it runs the pipelines of CI/CD. So that's be a good reason to either supplement it or replace it. I think that one of the points of the article was things have moved to declarative, GitOps, YAML files, things that we use to configure, Helm files in Kubernetes land. And is Jenkins, or the kind of the old approach, if we will, to CI/CD too stiff, too rigid? Going to be flexible enough? Going to be adapted to cloud native? And if it's going to be adaptable to cloud native, do you have to be using cloud native technologies? Now you can dig into the Jenkins code and find out how much of that kind of thing that they've adopted in, and I know they've worked on that. But it's a good question to ask. Is that the right way to do it, or do we need to continue to evolve, and what do we evolve to?
Well, to me, it was sort of a Muhammad comes to the mountain or the mountain comes to Muhammad kind of thing. And in that, I think at some point, some of the folks in the Jenkins community said, no, Jenkins isn't right for cloud native. And we spun up Jenkins X, which was, in my mind, always Jenkins for Kubernetes.
Yep.
But I don't know, as we sit here today, what the support for Jenkins X is at this point.
It's relatively young project, right? It just got promoted.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's getting the support of the Jenkins community. I mean, the Jenkins community is the reason why Jenkins still has 40% of market share, right? It's a strong, independent community, well managed, well run for the most part. And, Jenkins X was different, yet not. And, I think at some point the smart thing was to somehow subsume it into Jenkins. But at some point, maybe we'll get some folks from the Jenkins community on here and talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But after that article ran, I remember getting on in a discuss comment. Someone said, they thought differently around this whole issue of Jenkins' future. And I said, hey, if you feel this strongly, you should write an article about it. Mm-hmm. And they did. And that was the second article I wanted to bring up. And it's Jenkins and Jenkins X in 2024. And it's by Tiziano Catalano, who I think is out in Italy. I'm not 100% sure. But he wrote a beautiful article here. It's a little long, but it's well worth the read. And again, we'll have the URLs either on a QR code here for you if you're watching video, or in the show notes if you're not, with links. But again, I would really urge you to read that. I would read both articles taken as an A and a B. And between the both of them, you're going to get as much Jenkins as you can stand.
It is a part one and a part two, because he refers to the first article.
It definitely right. I would think it's an op-ed to the first article.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Right. And or a rebuttal. And but you need to read them both, I think, to really get a great handle on it. And by the way, both of these articles are not written by paid tech-strong writers. These are passionate community members who submitted, in at DevOps.com. We thank you for that. We encourage people watching and listening to this show. If you feel strongly about something DevOps related, you too can submit. Editor at DevOps.com will get you there for that. But those are two really good articles, Mitch, that I wanted to bring up, and they're specifically to Jenkins, but I think they go to the whole DevOps thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Good stuff. Thank you
Next
to
up,
people that wrote those. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you to both of them. Next up, I wanted to go kind of from the old to the new. So talking about, is Jenkins still relevant? And let's jump ahead to what's the deal with AI and DevOps, right? Is there, I mean, DevOps, are we going to see a co-pilot for DevOps kind of thing, right? And another article in DevOps.com that's gotten some attention is using LLMs to automate pipeline conversions from legacy to Tecton, and it's by Siva. Oh, I'm going to mess this one up. Siva Guranathan. And the idea here is, look, Tecton, which was a Google project, right? It's now CNCF, I'm pretty sure, though.
Yeah.
It's very popular. It's a popular tool here. How can we use LLMs and generative AI to make it better? And I, the gist of the article, if you haven't read it, is first he does a really good job of laying out why you want to migrate to Tecton if you're on Jenkins or Spinnaker or some harness or some other CI/CD tool. And that's, I guess, a personal choice, the pros and cons. And then if you are going to do that, though, here's how you could use LLMs and AI to kind of supercharge it.
Mm-hmm.
And, it as I mentioned, it got a lot of hits up on the site, but I think it's a reminder, again, we're in this next evolutionary phase of DevOps, and DevOps is staying current with what's going on out there, but it's adaptable. And I think this is kind of living proof of it, Mitch.
It is. And, it goes right to what you were talking about before of, okay, it is Kubernetes based. It's doing Kubernetes automation. It's declarative. That's, and it's also kind of working in a stateless type of environment. So a lot of the modern principles of software design that we apply to our applications today, it's rebuilt the idea of CI/CD pipelines and the tools and the platform technology that run that. And it was interesting, you think of LLMs and AI, what's the next great thing it's going to give us? I think of deep thought back to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, what's the question, right? 42 is the answer. What's the great, wonderful thing that AI is going to perform? Well, this article talks about using LLMs to help you kind of merge and converge your pipelines that you've already created in Jenkins and you've already created in Azure DevOps and GitLab, I believe, and basically transition that. So now you can take that information and transform it into what you could use inside Tecton instead of you rewriting all that. So it's kind of a transitionary. You don't have to throw that away. You can use that to help create the next environment and maybe run both, I guess. So it's a transitionary type use of AI. It isn't a rip and replace. This is going to change everything. We don't need developers anymore, or whatever kind of, crazy things get said.
Absolutely. Cool stuff. And again, we'll have the URL and QR code up for that one here. Hey, Mitch, the next thing I wanted to bring up was back to this, DevOps evolution and DevOps healthy. And it's actually something that comes off our TechStrong TV channel. And you can grab this video on techstrong.tv, as well as like 6,000 other videos we've recorded over the years. And it's with our friend Gene Kim, who, to many, he was the introduction of DevOps to many, right? The Phoenix Project,
he was,
including myself.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, right, Gene has renamed his DevOps Enterprise Summit to, and I hope I don't mess this up, IT Executive Leadership Summit or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And a lot of people said, I told you DevOps is dead. Even Gene Kim changed the name of it. And I had a chance to I was talking to Gene about his great new book out with Dr. Steven Spear about Wiring the Winning Organization, which is a great book, highly recommended. But I asked Gene why he did it. And, Gene's enthusiasm and support of DevOps is not faltered one iota. Mm-hmm. I think what the name change, which was, supported by a lot of folks in the DevOps world, was that Gene's, both the books that IT Rev publishes and the subsequent conference, which, has a lot to do around the books, was growing, with topics that weren't really DevOps related. They were related to leading winning teams, and high performing IT teams, which is kind of right out of the door of stuff that Gene and Jez Humble and Nicole Forsgren started. And so he wanted to reflect that and not bring people in under the guise of DevOps and then discuss all these things that weren't DevOps. But he is, still 100% behind DevOps. And if you listen to the interview there, you can hear it for yourself. I'm not putting words in his mouth. So, look, for those who were pointing to that as evidence of something, again,
Yes.
Fake news.
Fake news. I have not read the book yet. I'm excited to take a look at it. When I think back to the Phoenix Project, right, the whole part of the story is taking these things from manufacturing, right? Right, from the goals. Yeah, exactly. And if you think about the evolution of DevOps, that's happened from DevOps out now. Of course, we're like, how do we do security? How do we do governance? Everybody's taken some of the ideas of DevOps and trying to apply it within their job function, their organization, right? It's really permeated a lot of how companies work, almost like Agile has, right? Same kind of an idea. It seems like Gene's changing the name is to kind of recognize that we have to talk about it in the context of the enterprise when we talk about solving these really tough problems. And there's a lot of DevOps things that can, we won't call it DevOps when we talk about wiring the organization, but I would imagine some of those are pretty similar, if not the same, that we've been using in DevOps. Am I close or am I off base on that?
Yeah, I think you're on point. But hey, we could do a quick poll. No, we can't. Anyway,
we'll do a webinar, do a quick poll.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we could do a pulse meter out of this one, but certainly, Mitch, it's a good interview. I highly. It's a long one. It was one of the. I usually aim for those to be 15 minutes. I think it came out twice that, but anyway, do check it out. It's a good interview, and you can get Gene's take on that issue. Mitch, that's all I had on the docket to go over for today, but I wanted to take just maybe another 3 to 5 minutes and give people an idea of what to expect going forward on DevOps Chats, because we're going to be doing these weekly. We'll try to keep them, around this time in terms of length, but I wanted very much for this first show to be you and I. Mm-hmm. Just you and I, establishing sort of a rhythm. We may even do that for show 2. But as we move on to episode 3 and 4 and 5 and so on, we are going to bring in guests. If you'd like to be a guest on DevOps Chats, you could write to me at Alan at DevOps, ALAN at DevOps.com, and we'll try to fit you in there. We'll be featuring more videos we've done, as well as articles and TechStrong gang members, right? And I mean that in a good way, not like Crips and Bloods, but friends of TechStrong. So it'll be every week, and we encourage you to subscribe to it, whether you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify or Stitcher or some other Amazon or some other platform. Please subscribe and follow, so you'll stay up to date on the latest ones. We're going to do our best to bring you the very best of DevOps.
We will.
Content.
And we'd love to hear from you. If you have a question or you have an idea for a topic, or, hey, I think that thing Mitch said is full of hooey. Here's my opinion about it. We want to hear from you. Or, that was really great. Thanks for covering that.
Actually, we have an email set up for that, Mitchell. It's DevOpsChats@DevOps.com. But it's chats with an S. DevOpsChats@DevOps.com. And any comments, suggestions, or you want to speak or whatever, you could send to there as well.
That'd be perfect.
Well, Mitchell, it's good to be back in the saddle again, man. I can't believe we just sat here and rifled off like a 35-minute podcast, kind of just chit-chatting, but we did.
It's like riding a bike. It's just an e-bike now.
Yeah, I have an e-bike.
I know you do.
All right. Well, that's gonna call a wrap on this episode of DevOps Chat. Thanks for listening or watching or however you're doing this. I'm Alan Shimel.
And this is Mitch Ashley.
And you just listened to
DevOps Chats.
There we go. Bye-bye. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.